All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Finance Commission meeting of Thursday, February 13th, 2025. First order of business is approval of minutes from our January 16th meeting.
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Sarah, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alan. Any discussion? All right, we'll put it to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. All right. Thank you. Next up is to look at the second quarter of FY25. So Jeff, could you take us through this?
Sure. The solid kind of remains the same from the first quarter update. Through December, full year revenue is projected to slightly exceed budget expectations. Again, the two main drivers, we have the investment revenue. Obviously, the Federal Reserve has not decreased interest rates as kind of they had projected, so higher interest rates have allowed us to accrue a little bit more interest earnings. Again, the Copley is in there, but that is rapidly decreasing each month as we move through the project. So of the roughly $3 million, I would say 28% of that is attributed to Copley, about $1 million.
Okay.
So that amount will be going down each month as we get towards the closeout of the project. Building permit revenue, again, same thing, remains slower. Obviously, we've had a great past 2 years, but we are not seeing the projects come into play at this point.
Does it look like we'll hit the budget number estimates?
We're going to need a big spring, because right now we're only about 500,000 of the 1.8, so.
Okay. So it's basically back to normal levels.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I just made a note in here, some of the items, if you compare, I did, number one, the format, I did compare it to 24, so
Thank you.
if that format works
Yeah.
well for you, I'll keep
Yeah.
that going forward.
That does. Excellent.
I just made some notes in there, some of the transfers, we're holding off till later in the year, specifically the water sewer indirects. Again, that's an account that does need some additional revenue, so it's earning interest, so I've kept that in there. I'll move that at the end of the year. It's
Okay.
not impacting us, it's not causing us any issues.
Question on rentals. The year-to-date actual, I mean, do we get paid monthly, or do they just give a lump sum at the beginning? Or what do they
Combination,
do?
some are monthly, some are quarterly.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a mix of all
Okay,
of those.
right, okay.
So again, there's no real concerns on any of those line items for
Okay.
revenue.
Good.
Switching over to expenses, again, same thing, no significant concerns. I did highlight two areas just because they're not concerned, but it's something that we'll address, and we'll try to address in the budget going forward. Within the treasurer, their expenses, they have a line item where they pay the administrative fee for ambulance collections. So it's 5% of our collections. That number has historically been under budgeted. So
Okay.
you'll see it in your budget, we're trying to raise it, probably needs to go up a little bit more.
Yeah.
Again, 100% offset by revenue.
Yeah, I mean,
So
that's-
it's not an actual increase in expense, it's an increase in collections, and we're taking the revenue on the backside of that.
It's really a good thing when everything is said and done.
Correct. You don't want to see the expense go up, but it does correlate to an increase in revenue. And then just the traffic control fire line, labor costs above budget, again, historically, that's been over budget. It's an area we'll take a look at the end of the year to see if those allocations and the labor that's associated with that is in the right buckets. But again, no major concerns on the expense side. You will see a number of items that they look like they're more than 50%, 70%, or a lot of departments still use the encumbrances for known expenses, monthly recurring expenses. So those are all the expenses that those departments feel that they are going to utilize for the year.
Okay. Had a question on retirement contributions, which is on the last page, and there's still money available. Is that meaning that there'll be money left over at the end of the year, or there's something else we still have to pay into?
Retirement, okay.
19.
Yeah, most likely there's something else we still have to pay into.
Okay. I'd be curious if you could
Yeah,
maybe
I'll
take a
take a
quick
look
look
at
at that. Because, it's a significant, no, 300 grand, it's a significant amount of money. It's like 5% of the value, so I was just curious. Okay.
I'll double check that.
I had a question. Maybe this is related to what you were just talking about with the fire and things like that. But the traffic control fire salaries is way over budget. It's a small number, total amount. It's only a $39,000 budget line item, and we've spent $81,000. But I'm just curious, how does that work? Why, like?
So it's the fire alarm labor, and then there's some of the holiday for the common from the light department that's booked into there.
But at what point do we need to, like, what is that offset by? Like, you know, you aren't authorized to spend more than 100% of the budget on,
Correct.
like, within a
Because
category.
these are all salaries, so salaries are allowed to be over the budget, but they're not stopped in there.
Okay.
So the salaries will be dumped into that account, that's what we'll take a look at and make sure, some should be in facilities, some maybe in the light department. We'll have to do that accounting for that.
Mm-hmm, okay.
It's kind of a catch-all salary account right now for fire alarm labor and some other work that the light department does.
Okay.
So it's primarily a light department expense.
It's a town expense for
Yeah.
light department work that's they're
Okay.
doing for the town.
Okay.
Because it was contracted services.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Just one, if I can backtrack on the revenue, I know last time, Eric, you had a question on the EV charging.
Yeah.
So we do, the general government takes 100% of the revenue. There are some small expenses that are associated with that, but if you look at the rates versus what we're paying, I won't say it's double, but it's almost double in terms of, you know, what we're paying versus what the revenue is.
Yeah, I did
So-
see that the two pieces, the
So
revenue
at this,
and
yeah,
expense.
so all the revenue's coming in here because
Okay.
it's a small amount, it doesn't make sense to break it up
Yeah.
between, you know, like department and wherever else it may be.
We're basically buying electricity and then selling it.
Correct.
getting the revenue,
Correct.
So,
Okay.
round and round.
Okay, good.
All right, so it looks like we are pretty much on track. We aren't starting to talk about budget tonight, but just to make everybody clear that I did share the information that Tony shared for the preliminary FY26 budget, and we'll be looking at these numbers with respect to those numbers. All right. Next item on the agenda is ARPA. Jeff, can you take us through this?
Yeah, so again, I sent you out kind of just our ARPA worksheet. Again, most of this is prior to my time joining Norwood, so just for background, all expenditures had to be obligated by the end of December 2024, which we just passed, so all of our amounts have been obligated. These are all the projects that have been approved and/or entered into the county. We have until 2026, December 31st, 2026, to actually spend the money, so that's why you'll see on the bottom there, the various projects that are still in the pipeline that have not been marked as completed.
Will we have any recurring costs, based on, we've funded something through ARPA, and there'll be something continuing after we spent the ARPA money that's gonna be, our dime?
You'll see a couple of things in the budget, within the Board of Health and the Council on Aging. So those have been, explained that those will be carrying out costs in the budget.
Okay,
But the other stuff is all related to construction or engineering, so that will
Okay.
not have an ongoing impact.
okay, so the ones which are gonna be continuing expenses, are they significant expenses?
They're people related.
Okay, so it's personnel.
Correct.
Okay, because I know that, an ARPA is an example, like the Norfolk Sanitarium, I assume that's shared by a number of communities in Norfolk County.
But you'll see, if you look through the budget, you'll see the Board of Health and the Council on Aging both have increase in their salaries
Yeah.
related to the ARPA funding ceasing at the end of June.
Okay,
And I just put on there, we did, I think I mentioned this the last time, but we did put a kind of last minute request in because a lot of towns didn't look like they're using full allocation. So we talked to the county and said, if there's gonna be additional funds out there, we'd like to put some projects in
mhm,
to get obligated, even though,
Mhm.
we were not. So
Yeah.
we haven't heard from them yet, though.
okay,
And we do have a couple of our projects may be coming in under budget, so there may be some money left over there. So there's
Okay.
still a question on how that's gonna be handled
Okay.
across, not just within Norwood, but, other towns as well.
all right.
Right.
So it's almost an additional 2.7?
Of what we asked, yeah, basically I
Yeah.
put in generators, the ambulances, just
Okay.
stuff that was on the what was approved on the capital plan for
Yeah.
out years.
Okay,
Just said, hey, if there's extra money, these are ready to go, these are kind of, shovel ready, for lack of a better term.
Okay.
We can
Yep.
go out, we can
Yeah.
buy the generators if they tell us we have the money, we can certainly put in the order in for ambulances if we have the money.
Okay.
yep,
But it's unlikely at this point, but we'll see.
it's worth a
Didn't
thought.
hear exactly. Didn't hear
Okay.
exactly.
Hospital?
Yeah, nothing, no.
No?
Unfortunately,
Hospital?
no.
All right. The other thing we wanted to talk about is, what sources of federal funding is the town
Yeah.
making use of and counting on, and are there any areas of concern there?
Again, I think it's at this point where we're just monitoring. On the town side, there's not a lot of federal funding. Obviously, we have some firefighters, some public safety grants that are out there. Obviously, it's gonna be more of an impact to the schools, if and when something happens.
Mm-hmm.
There is within the government finance officers, there's a whole legislative team that's been monitoring and kind of providing updates. They've kind of gone silent over the last couple of weeks, so I think, again, it's a wait and see approach.
Yeah.
Would be good to have that number. If you lost all your federal funding, we'd be losing X dollars,
Right.
town-wise.
Yeah, again, from the town side, it's not a huge amount.
No, I mean,
From the
including
schools,
schools.
2.3 million, I think, is what their total grants were in this year's budget, I think.
So if we call it
It's in that
2.5.
similar
In that range.
range, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, when we looked at grants last month, I didn't bring that back with me, but there were some grants in there that are federal.
Correct. But again, at this point, those were not areas that were targeted in that memo release.
Okay,
So again, that was kind
Right.
of, the initial was specific to certain programs and certain other items, I guess.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
Okay.
nothing that really would have impacted us. I think the firefighter, there were some issues on there, but that's been resolved, and we did get that grant, so we are spending that money.
Okay.
So we're not impacted by anything at this point.
But if we were to, for discussion purposes, say that the potential worst-case hit was $2.5 million, that would be relatively accurate?
Again, mostly on the school side, yes.
That's what I'm saying, but
Yes.
including the schools.
Yeah,
and
at
part
this
of the
point, yeah.
town,
I mean,
That would be, okay.
Right. Now, one thing to be aware of on the school side is a lot of the money that comes in is specifically Title grants. So there's Title I, which is for schools with a large number of lower income students. Title III, I think, is the one that is related to like English language learners and things like
Right.
that. And then there's the IDEA grants, which are related to special education. All of those are specifically funded by legislation.
Mm-hmm.
So some people I have talked to have said that if the Department of Education were to go away, that still wouldn't mean that Title I would go away. It would
Right,
just
I get
be
that, yeah.
administered by
Administered,
someone,
yeah.
by some other, it would be a
Yeah.
reorg more than cancellation.
Yes, I get it,
Yep.
yeah. I was created with the reorg, so
Yeah, exactly.
eye rolling, okay. But yeah, but point is, the doomsday scenario is 2.5 million, something likely is less than that,
Yes.
so that's,
That's good information to have.
Yes.
right. If one were
Agreed.
to make a reserve for it, that would be a number you'd want to use, so.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. All right, any other questions on that? All right, budget balancing discussion. Alan and I attended the budget balancing committee meeting last week. We have not yet settled on recommendations for targets for the schools, the general government and facilities. We've kind of reviewed some of the first pass at the bottom line numbers. Think come to some agreement on the revenue projections. That's not really in question. There were still well, last we met, the health insurance number was still up in the air. It's going to be up in the air until like June, but it was a little bit like we were still looking for a little more clarity there and a little more clarity on pension and that. But also, Alan and I expressed our concern as a FinCom that we, that the budget would be looking for so much in one-time monies to support the operating budget, and that is not in compliance with our financial policies, and that we are very concerned about what that means for a fiscal cliff either next year or the following year. And so we agreed that we would have another budget balancing committee meeting and come back and look at some hopefully reduced estimates. You
Yeah.
want to talk a little more about that?
Yeah, I mean, we gave them some suggested numbers. I mean, as Maya have said, we have concerns as a FinCom with using one-time money. It's not only against our policies, but fiscally, it's just not a good policy to have,
not
because
sustainable,
eventually it catches up to you. We used over $5 million worth of one-time money last year. We're probably in the $7 or $8 to $9 million range this year. So to make a long story short, we told them that it's fundamentally the FinCom has an issue with this. However, we also understand with upwards of $20 million of free cash, people in town aren't going to stand for having layoffs. It just isn't going to happen. At least this year, we know that. So we made a couple of proposals, one to the schools and one to general government. Essentially, the general government, we said, we will give you your contractual obligations and the money associated with the additional trash fees, whatever that number comes out to be. I mean, we didn't have anything from Tony at the time. Schools, it was a little bit more complicated. I think Tony was looking for like 5.7%. That was just too much. Schools was even more, is 8.1%, but they have certain other things, and they're also opening up the new middle school, which we acknowledged. And when we approved the middle school 3-4 years ago, we knew certain things were coming, so it certainly wouldn't be fair to deny them to the schools at this point. This isn't the way we do business. So we told the schools we would give you your contractual obligations, the additional money associated with transportation, because they're a new transportation contract, plus they need additional buses for the middle school. In terms of their out-of-district costs, it was relatively minor. It was like $70,000, not the huge numbers we've seen in the past, which is great. For personnel, they wanted upwards of 11.6 personnel. 9.6 of it would be at the middle school. And we said, when you could tell us, you could give us all the justification you want and how you think that maybe the things have changed since we was approved 3-4 years ago. But when we went to town meeting, we told them maximum 5 additional positions that you were going to get at the middle school. So we will give you 5 additional positions in this budget. They took it, they said, thank you. Little pushback from both sides, but they will come back to us with new proposals, I would hope. And to me, what we've done is, we have agreed, and we understand, you're not going to have any layoffs. All your contractual obligations are going to be met. All the unusual things that happen to each of you, such as the audio control, such as the trash contract, as well as the transportation, you get those. And to the schools, we're going to give you some additional positions, because we understand you're going to need some additional positions at the middle school. We're not going to spend $150 million for middle school and not give you additional positions. So we'll see what they come back with.
So we left it that the Budget Balancing Committee would reconvene on February 26th, and then hopefully take a vote at that point on a recommendation for how to divvy up the money. Is basically the role of the Budget Balancing Committee. This this kind of gets us back more to what the Budget Balancing Committee used to do prior to the override. That there used to be a little bit more of like, okay, let's everybody bring together what they're hoping for, and let's look at what our resources are, and then make some decisions about how to divvy out that money. Hopefully it's not exactly like it used to be, where there's threats of the sky is falling and then, we find money and we don't want to do that. But I do think it's appropriate for us to, as a Budget Balancing Committee and as a FinCom, to, push back a little bit and say, like sharpen the pencils and let's see what we can do to bring this number down.
Yeah. I mean, it's not gonna be down the 0 or 2 or 3 million, I mean, we get that. But, we do expect to see some changes. I think it'll be more of a reduction on the school side than it will be in the town side, based on that criteria. But, we'll see what the numbers are, because, we're gonna have to go to the voters soon. And if the voters look and see that, the schools are going up, a little more than 8%, towns going up approximately 6%, in these, times of Prop 2.5, they're not gonna look at that very favorably.
Town is at 5.5.
Is it 5, it's down to 5.5, okay. Better. But,
It looked like the governor's budget had had about $1 million more of Chapter 78 than we had originally estimated.
yes, that's
That been
accounted
taken into
for.
account?
That's accounted for, that was good news. The bad news, as Maya have noted, is that health insurance is up.
Yeah.
We assumed 8%, it's probably gonna be closer to 10.5%,
Yeah. So angel God giveth and they taketh away.
And unfortunately, like something like 3/4 of the additional tax revenue that we generate is gonna have to go to, 2/3 to 3/4 is gonna have to go to health insurance.
Mhm.
Yeah. The year-over-year increase in Chapter 70 is right around 1.2 million, but the schools were requesting an increase of almost 5 million in their budget.
Right, it didn't cover the whole thing, but it was at least
Yes,
made it a
absolutely.
little bit easier.
Right.
Yeah.
And the even with Alan's suggestions for reduction, it would still be probably a more than $3.5 million increase over last year.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, the numbers that I was suggesting would be in the range of about a 6.1% increase. Which is higher than most of the towns and most of the surrounding towns to Norwood. But, we thought that, is it more than we'd like? Sure, but we thought that given all the circumstances, we could justify that number.
I mean, one part of the justification, I think, particularly in terms of funding additional positions in the middle school, is that a good deal of the free cash that we have is generated by interest on middle school money. So it's sort of like, okay, we're giving you your money back kind of thing, it's
Except that interest isn't gonna be generated.
Yeah.
I know, but at least for an interim period.
Yeah,
You know what I'm
yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
So it's-
Yeah,
it's-
no, I do,
Yeah, I mean,
I hear what you're saying.
And
I kind of make that connection.
Yeah, and I get it, how they wanted a budget, they look at the amount of free cash that's available, and, even though they didn't pull out the total wish list, both sides had a few things in there, and it just, again, you shouldn't finance your budget using one-time money, and I think we
No,
made
you
that
can't.
point clear to them, and we'll see what we get back.
Yeah, it's really an interim solution.
right.
This will get you to there, and then you gotta make a real decision.
And a little bit later, we want to talk about some other uses we have, other uses we're thinking of having for free cash.
Yep.
We get a raise.
Hmm?
We're gonna get a raise.
Yeah, there we
Yeah.
go.
Good double
Yeah.
our salary, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All to the right of the decimal.
Whatever, 100% of 0 is still 0.
All right.
Actually, we're doing new math for us.
So that's what's up with budget balancing. Regarding that FY26 budget process, we do have preliminary budgets from facilities, from general government, from the schools. We have their high level budget. We don't have the line items yet. They're still working on it, but they did share that high level information, which Sean Mannion sent to me this afternoon, and I sent out to you less than an hour before this meeting, so I'm sorry about that. But the idea was that we would get it tonight so that we could start a review, so that at our next meeting, we would be ready to be talking a little bit more about budgets. I guess one question I have is there other information we want about budgets? I know, Ann, you had mentioned wanting to have a little bit more information about how many personnel and how many are funded by grants and things like that.
Yeah.
Let's put together a list of information we want regarding budgets.
Well, that basically was what I wanted, because if we're getting, depending on how many grants, especially with the schools, for the government or not, I think it behooves us to make sure that we understand what kind of an impact it's gonna have for
Okay.
these budgets. So, that's the one I came up with.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure that I included that in our
Thank
list
you.
of requests, yes.
I think, and it might be in the papers that you gave me, or you might have given it to us before. I think it would be useful to know, is it just Board of Health for the ARPA funds that
Council on Aging.
result
Senior
in
Center has
council?
one person as
So
well.
I think if we can just make sure we understand which ones those are,
Mhm.
which positions those are, I think that would be good information for us to just have for information if people ask, why are things
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
going up
Typically-
and what the positions are.
Tony sent you the presentation he did to the Board of Selectmen, right?
Is it
You
in
did,
there?
yeah.
There's a personnel count in there, I'm not sure if it's identified there, but it's easy enough to break out.
Okay.
Okay.
I just saw that there were a lot of slides. I didn't actually go through them before
Yeah.
this
He did
meeting.
one for each department, he did the personnel count of, in there,
Okay.
the history, the little chart that's gone in
Yeah.
the back of the budget book.
Yeah.
Okay,
Impact Norwood has 2 people on,
that would probably follow their Board of Health, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh,
But these are specifically ARPA funds, so they're no longer grant funded, so I think we're absorbing those into our budget. I do think it's important to know the grant funded employees, and, but I think we've had that discussion before when we had the grants, when we reviewed the grants
Mhm.
last month, so.
Do we have any more clarity on how much money might be left in the Copley account when we're done?
Excuse me, in which account?
In other words, the Copley
Yeah.
middle school money, there was a suggestion that at the end of the day,
Yeah.
close out the contract, there'll be money left.
Yeah.
Do we have a sense of how much that is, and do we have a sense of what,
Well-
like what to spend it on?
The short answer is yes.
Okay,
The long answer is a little bit more complicated. But right now, things are going well. I mean, we fortunately were the beneficiary of some additional money from the state MSBA,
Mhm.
something they have never done before, because of the concerns and the problems people had funding projects during the post-COVID period where the prices just went completely out of sight. And, in fact, when we did the building, we had to go through several series of value engineering. We probably reduced almost $10 million worth of stuff. So, that being said, plus or minus, probably going to have maybe $10, $11 million left.
okay, that's good money.
From the bond issue. That's money which, it's a bond issue. We have to spend it, and Jeff can,
Just been on
correct
projects
me if
that are
I'm wrong.
25, 30
We have to
year,
spend
right?
it on projects that are in the range of 25 to 30 years, just like the middle school is. I mean, there was a suggestion by one of the school committee members, like, why don't we take some of this money and put it into a fund that we could use to fund some maintenance in the schools? And you can't do that, because you have to find ways to finance, a project of the same, time, frame as the middle school. This is money that town meeting will have to determine how to use. It's not money that goes exclusively to general government projects or school projects. It's money that general government will determine where it goes. It could go all to general government, it could go all to the schools. But it's really, where we want to put the money. It's money that's, it's on our taxes right now. If we don't do anything with it, it's just, we're just gonna pay the taxes on it, and not getting anything in return.
Other than the interest.
Yeah,
I think it's
other than
important.
some interest, yeah.
It's important.
And we've gotten some, by the way, by buying bonds early, we get a better interest rate, plus we're able to generate some interest, on the bonds before they're actually obligated in the project. So it's a little bit of give and take. It was a good thing that we bought bonds when we did, when everything's said and done.
There's a lot of nuances to this because it's a debt exclusion.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of additional factors that go into that. We can't just pay off your debt. You can't return this. As you mentioned, it's with the DOR, it's strict, it has to be utilized for other borrowing projects of
Mhm.
the same tenor. So 25 years, that's what it's limited to. We can't use it for anything else.
Yeah, I mean, it
In
was-
regards to the interest, as of June of this year, we're not going to be earning any interest on that going forward. There's an arbitrage rule. You can't borrow money, invest it, make interest. There's a certain period of time with capital
Right.
projects. So in June, at that point, we're gonna talk to the bank and say,
Just put in
pay us the
zero.
rate that we're paying. So technically, it offsets the interest,
Okay.
3.1%.
Right,
Give us that or less, so we don't have to, if we earn anything above that, we
Mhm.
have to rebate back that to the IRS.
okay.
So there will be no interest earnings come June.
Okay.
I mean, this is, I guess, one would say a good problem to have, but we're not exactly at a shortage of projects that are 25 to 30. If you look as a member of capital outlay, right?
Yeah.
There are several projects that, it's just a
Right.
matter
Yeah.
of getting town meeting to approve it and whether or not we have to go back to the voters to.
We most likely will, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
we're still
so-
a ways from it, we still gotta take down.
Well,
there's
there's still a lot of things that could go wrong. Yes, I understand that, but.
We're probably about 2 years away from that.
But I don't think it's bad to have these conversations,
No, no.
because I don't think we have enough of these conversations in committees about all of the things that are coming.
No, and to be honest with you, I don't know in the end how much money is going to be left. I mean,
Right.
You know, we have about $10 million, you know, plus or minus $1 million here or there, right now, but, you know, there may be some other expenses in the middle school. I mean, as an
Right.
example, they haven't started to take the building down. God only knows what you're gonna
Right.
find when you take a 50-year-old building down. You know, we need some additional parking. You know, we're looking at whether or not it makes any sense to have some screening on the top floor of the school, you know, to hide some of the RTU units that, you know, the air handling units or whatever that are there. Some people would like it. More people I've talked to think it's a waste of money, but that's something we're gonna have to discuss and have a, you know, in our middle school building committee down the road and try to make some decisions. So I think what I'm saying is, right now, we have 10. In the end of the project, probably have a little less than that, but we'll still have a substantial amount of money that we'll have to try to figure out what to do with.
I mean, it seems to me the money was approved by the voters for a school building. We probably should use any excess for school buildings. That's my personal thought, you know, that.
I,
That's
just
above
to-
our pay grade.
I know it's above our pay grade, but to me, that would be the way to do it. and I'm just-
I get that, but, you know, if you look at, you know, that's a discussion we'll have down
Right.
the road. But if you look at both the town meeting resolution as well as the question which went before the voters, it wasn't $150 million for Norwood schools. It was $150 million very specifically for the Coakley
That
in
is
both
true.
instances. So, I mean, I suspect when everything is said and done, you know, there'll be some, you know, whatever, good projects, and, you know, on both sides, we'll be able to get some benefit.
But I think Sarah's right that we need to have
Yeah.
larger conversations about what are all the things that are
Yeah.
coming. I think, you know, this conversation about, you know, should we put some screening around the things on the roof?
Yeah.
I don't think that's the kind of conversation we want to have in a vacuum, right? It's balanced against what are all the other things that we
Yeah.
could potentially use that money for, and like what are those big ticket items that are on the capital plan?
What are big ticket items aren't on the capital plan? There was a 2018 study of our school buildings that indicated a significant amount of work necessary at our elementary schools. We're redoing how we operate our elementary schools. I mean, there's a lot of money that doesn't even exist on the capital
Yeah.
outlay
And that was
plan. That
certainly
is.
what I was thinking about.
I mean, that
Because
could
we're
be-
bringing, if we're planning, my understanding is that's going to happen in 2 years. You can't open those if they're not, I mean, there's roofs to be done and there were other
Yeah.
things, those buildings are old,
Yeah,
all
no,
of them.
No, when the study was done, when we did the study, we thought we were going to be doing elementary schools, not the middle school, but be that as it may. You know, the determination of the study was that the elementary schools are really kept up well, they're in great shape, but they're old buildings, you know, the HVAC systems break down, you periodically need flooring, roofs,
When
windows.
they can't get parts for some of their.
Right. I mean, it may be in the end that we look at everything and say a substantial part of that money goes to certain projects, in the
Oh, I
other
don't think,
elementary
yeah, I
schools.
mean,
I don't know.
I'm saying beyond this $10 million, like that's.
I think that's a question more for capital outlay,
Yes.
likely to look at, because even if there's money available, there will be money available, we don't know how much, but it won't be available likely for at least a couple of years.
As members of the capital outlay, can I ask you, in the 5-year plan, is there anything related to the elementary schools on there?
There is not.
And I think that's my issue. Is town hall on the 5-year plan now? I'm asking the capital
trying to
outlay
remember.
people.
I think there's some kind of placeholder there, not in the library.
Well, yeah.
And there's roofs that need to be
The
done.
library
There is-
moved up.
Yeah, there is a placeholder for roofs, based on the townwide
Yeah.
roof study.
Yeah.
I think this is what concerns me as a member of this board, that where is the list of everything that might actually potentially happen? That's what I'm asking, because you're talking about,
Yeah. I was
because
just sitting
this
here
is,
thinking we should bring that in.
You should bring that plan to the next meeting, basically.
Right.
Yeah, and in terms of doing work on school buildings, I mean, that's fine,
but this isn't limited to school
No, no, but I'm
buildings.
saying, but-
There are town buildings
Oh,
that
I
need
know
a
that, but I'm
significant
saying,
amount of work.
if we're
This
gonna.
building was closed yesterday.
Yeah, and we'll get to, but if we're gonna spend significant amount of money on school buildings, I wanna make sure we have some kind of assurance from the school committee that these buildings, just for what we know today, are gonna be there for a period of time.
Well, I mean, but that's not, that's a whole, to me, this is where the boards are operating in silos. We have a number of buildings.
Yeah.
First of all, I would make the argument that we should be looking at every town building that we own and considering how it's used.
Mhm.
And so I'm not going just with the schools, because I'd like to know how all the town buildings that we own are
Well-
used as well, Alan, because we just
Yeah.
need a bigger, everybody's looking at it in silos. Where does it all come together? I imagine it's probably the Board of Selectmen, and it might exist, I just don't know. And it's for you're talking about
Yeah.
long-term planning, and if you're gonna talk about, we're talking about using free cash right now for this year's budget and how it's unsustainable going forward. We've had this discussion before.
Yeah.
We know what happened.
Yeah.
We passed an operational override in 2018,
19.
19. 2019. It lasted for the amount of time that it was supposed to, for many good reasons and good management. We're heading that way as well, but we're also talking about an awful lot of large capital projects that aren't going to
Yeah.
be funded through any free cash. It's going to have, I don't see any way of funding it other than a debt exclusion override. These can't all hit at the same time. We
Yeah.
can't possibly believe that we as a
Yeah.
town, we could go and ask we can go and ask the residents, but that's a big ask.
No,
That's-
you're.
That's the point I'm trying to make, like, if, I feel like it's our role on the FinCom is to maybe start thinking about some of this stuff.
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, we have some big things coming down the road, and one of the thoughts I had, was maybe some of this money could be put, in addition to some free cash, could be put towards a fund to rehabilitate the town hall, because we know we have to do this. I mean, it was just a tip of the iceberg what happened the last couple of days with the HVAC system. We know that the systems in this building are old, they're falling apart, how they've stayed, in use for this long, well, you never know. And if you get into this building, first off, nothing is up to code. So, complete and I have no idea.
We
what-
all, yeah, it's the
Complete
same as going
HVAC and,
through.
HVAC and plumbing and electrical and, you got asbestos all over the place. So you're gonna have to gut the building, then you have to find some place to put the people in the interim, So.
Well, and what's
I-
the best use of it, right? Like what department, like we own a number of buildings, right? So, don't just look at one building, look at all of the town buildings to figure out how do we make it so it works best and
Well,
hopefully most efficiently
Yeah.
for our town.
Yeah, well, maybe that's a discussion that, we should have both with the facilities department as well as with the capital outlay, that, maybe.
Because our,
Right,
the facilities department was at the school committee meeting, meetings ago,
Couple
talking
times
about
ago.
the significant amount of work that needs to be done.
yeah, yeah.
And it was a big number in 2018, so
It's
it
probably-
undoubtedly has not
It
gotten
was
smaller.
$44 million then, it's probably at least double that now, one would expect, but, I have no idea what's necessary in some buildings. Fortunately, some of the buildings we've had have recently been rehabilitated, you have a new DPW, you get a new electric light, major improvements to the fire station, et cetera, but there are other buildings in town which need work. What's gonna happen with the Savage Center as an example is a
Savage
perfect
Center, the
case.
Norwood Light Broadband that way.
Perfect, yeah,
know.
the building that's being used now by facilities. So, you're absolutely right. I think that capital outlay, and may have to lead the discussion to make sure that the right people get involved early enough in these meetings so that as a town, like you say, and you're 100% right, that we make decisions in silos. What's good for me as opposed to what's good for you. It's human nature. We get that.
I'm not, it's
We need a
just
town,
questions.
it's a town-wide discussion.
Yes.
Absolutely.
It's not school buildings and town buildings, it's
It's
buildings
Norwood
because,
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
sorry.
And I suspect Mr. Riccardi and Mr. Follen can give a very good presentation on what's needed at most of these buildings.
But I also think in addition to what's physically needed in the buildings, there's also a discussion about what's the best use of some of these buildings.
Yeah.
Where should certain,
Yeah.
does it make sense to revisit where certain departments are housed?
Yeah,
No.
yeah.
And I don't have anything in particular in mind. I just
No.
think that,
Well, I just think in the same way we did a study of the school buildings and however that may have been used. I don't think it would hurt for, I don't know if we want to do a study, but for people to discuss how that is.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure I'd be willing to pay for another study right now.
It doesn't need to be a study, just like you said, a
Yeah,
discussion.
just have a discussion.
List out all the buildings,
A
here's how they're
discussion with the
used, does that
people
make sense?
who
Yeah.
are responsible for the buildings. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the
They
that's the
don't
people who
know.
work in these buildings. It's not us. We don't,
Right.
Yeah.
that's not, or
No, but
it's
again-
not any really elected board. That would be the people who
Yeah.
live and breathe in these buildings every day.
But again, when you're gonna have a substantial amount of money available to spend for buildings, it's not my money or your money, it's which project should it
Correct.
best go to,
And I mean-
which needs it the most.
It's prioritizing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like everything, like my checkbook versus your, we're talking about the town's checkbook, so.
Yep.
I balance my checkbook, I want people to know
I'm
that.
no doubt.
I'm very excited to come into this building tomorrow to work with the asbestos comment you made, so. I appreciate that.
Hey,
You weren't crawling around in the crawl space below, though, are you?
You're not,
With the flex tape.
no, you're not, banging into the walls or, taking threats or whatever.
If I am, that's when you take me out of here.
All right.
Just call us, we'll come.
Yeah.
All right.
One thing, we had a question at our last meeting about how the hospital is being assessed as
Oh,
the
that's
construction
Yeah.
progresses. Do we have an answer? Do they reassess them every year, or do
They will,
they wait till it's finished?
the construction, they'll pick up, when they do the assessment, I think, if I remember correctly, they'll pick up about $100 million of value. That's what it's estimated to be at.
So as
That's
it
more-
progresses, they update the assessments as they
Yeah.
go up? Okay, so it's not just wait till it's all done? and
No,
then-
absolutely
yeah,
not.
Okay,
No,
so
we'll
every
have to-
year, whatever it
yeah,
is, okay.
Exactly, yep.
The other question I guess I have, and maybe, I don't know if it's a concern, is if we've been taxing it as a for-profit enterprise, and if it were ultimately to be sold to a nonprofit entity, what does that do to our tax revenues?
Money goes away.
Well, does it go away, or does that value get spread
Well-
over the rest of the town?
The tax money from the hospital, goes down to zero. But the amount of money, but the tax money is still
The levy doesn't
in the
go
budget.
down.
Levy stays the same, just we have to pick up more.
Okay, so it's not a net loss to the town, it's
No.
just how it's apportioned. Okay.
Correct, yeah.
And hopefully, whatever
You have
nonprofit
a pilot.
entity would provide some pilot payment, yes.
Would be on top of the levy.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that
Yeah.
actually would be a good thing.
Yeah.
If nothing else, having the hospital operating would be a wonderful thing, right?
We're in finance commission
I mean,
mode.
yeah, we're trying to, the other thing is having the hospital is gonna reduce our ambulance costs and having to buy new ambulances and so
Right.
forth. And that's,
Yeah.
so yes, there's a number of financial benefits other than
Yeah.
just,
I mean, the firefighters and the police officers would surely like to see a new hospital. You'll
Yes.
take a lot of the burden off of them.
Yeah.
right.
All right. So that was our discussion of the status of the FY26 budget. I think we got a little
Sorry.
sidetracked, but that's okay. So the next item on our agenda is discussion regarding transfer of free cash to reserves. We do have a Maytown meeting coming up, and maybe it's time to start thinking about I don't think we're ready to put any numbers in, but are there areas that we would like to recommend that some money be transferred to? And I think, Alan, in particular, you had asked for this to be on the agenda.
Yeah, I mean, I had a few things. Among other things, I think we should probably put some money into a sped reserve for the schools. With the understanding we'd like this money used more for unexpected rather than used to balance the budget. I mean, that's really what I think our intent is. I'd like to see, we're gonna have a lot of free cash available, and, we should put some of this in the reserves, for future purchases. I'd like to see an amount of money go into stabilization. If for no other reason that if the selectmen, as they haven't done the last 2 years, haven't agreed to put an item on the agenda to set up a capital reserve fund, I'd like to put money in the stabilization. I mean, Jeff's concern is that if you take money out of stabilization, the rating agencies may look at that negatively, but maybe the rating agency, it could be known in the rating agencies that this is really just an area that we're sort of parking the money, because it's just the best, place we have to park it, and the intent is, again, assuming that we're at the level of stabilization that we should be, but anything over that, we'd like to use for projects. And again, I'm thinking of the town hall down the road, to use that as part of the seed money for the town hall. And again, do we want to ask the selectmen again if they want to set up a capital reserve fund?
I was just going to ask that question, because I would think we would want to ask that. Is that something that's appropriate? I know we need to send the request to the Board of Selectmen, but is that something you can discuss at budget balancing or no?
It's not really under the purview of budget
Okay.
balancing, but I do think that in my conversations with the chair of the Board of Selectmen, it sounds like it might be acceptable if we specifically said, can we come and talk to you about this? Not just, will you approve a warrant article? But like, we would like to actually discuss.
I mean, we're meeting with, are we having, a joint meeting
No,
with the
no.
select? It's gonna, okay.
We have not found that joint meetings were the most effective way to
Okay.
review the budget.
review the
Yeah,
budget.
Okay,
so.
good, all right, I don't disagree, so we'll have to,
So would you need a motion to request a meeting with the Board of Selectmen to discuss the potential for a capital reserve article on the warrant, capital reserve warrant article? Did I
Yeah, we
word
could
that
do that.
correctly?
Yeah.
Is that what you're looking for, Alan? Like to go before them and ask?
we could, yeah.
Or we could also have a more general conversation about reserves and like we could say why we think that a capital reserve fund might make sense. We could also
Mhm.
talk about additional payments into the compensated absences fund or into
Right.
the general purpose stabilization, override stabilization, special education reserve. I mean, there's different options, but I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of one-time money available, and I think it's appropriate for there to be a larger conversation about how should this be used.
So
Yes.
when we did the override, there was an MOA, basically about how this money was gonna be spent. Here are the guidelines. And I'm wondering if it would be appropriate to have a similar type of MOA regarding this unprecedented amount of free cash. That, okay, we have $20 million of free cash, here's how we wanna allocate it. And
Yeah.
part of my thought here was, one, we need to have that overall discussion and agreement of how we're gonna divvy that
Yeah.
up. But also, is it too limiting to stick it in various funds that have various rules for taking it back out? Would it be better to say, we're gonna decide, we have $20 million worth of money, we're going to use this much for this year's budget, we're gonna allocate this much for, some capital items, we're gonna say this money for whatever, sped or whatever, kind of divvy up the money, but maybe just leaving it in free cash with an agreement about how to spend it would give us more flexibility to deal with circumstances as they arise. Because we can just keep carrying free cash, right?
You can keep carrying free cash.
And only requires a majority vote of town meeting to spend it, it just,
Yeah, I think the challenge is we have to figure out how much we're gonna need to use in this year's budget, knowing that next year's gonna be very, very similar circumstances.
Right.
I think capital, I wasn't there, but I know, the fire truck, the ladder truck's gonna come up, that's $1.3 million right off the bat, that probably has to be ordered soon. So there's gonna be some immediate needs to happen as well, so
Yeah.
put it into capital and take it right back out is not ideal.
and that's kind of what I was thinking about,
So
if we
you
just
gotta
Yeah.
kind of figure out what's on the docket.
allocate it to
Right,
free
well, and I
cash.
feel like, I think what I understood we were originally talking about was maybe more along the lines of what you're thinking about is like, it was just sort of a desire to earmark some of these funds
Right.
for certain uses so that it wasn't, kind of for the same reason we were talking about, like, well, we can't really have a conversation about what we should do about the Coakley roof without discussing all the other things that are out there. And I think I'm nervous that we're going to get to a point where we're going to say, like, oh, we need a ladder truck. And we haven't, like, put all the other items out there to discuss. And so the thing that becomes first in line might get funded just because it was first in line, but not necessarily because it was the highest priority. And I'm making no value judgment on the ladder truck whatsoever, it just was what was mentioned. But I think that maybe you're right, maybe in MOA to say, like, look, this is kind of our general plan for how we want to spend this. We're not putting it into a official reserve fund, but this is our agreement. Maybe that would be a reasonable thing.
I mean, yeah, that's certainly, doable. I mean, I'd also like to put a piece of change away in the stabilization fund.
And maybe that's part of the.
Yeah,
agreement.
but weird,
Yeah.
because I want something committed to something. Because what I'm afraid of is that if there's free cash available, people, particularly budget time, may not make the hard decisions that they have to because, oh, here's all the free cash, we could use that,
Right.
you know?
I mean, we have to think about the operating budget in May.
Yeah.
Then there's the capital spending
Right.
that we'll do in the
Yeah.
fall, so you have to allocate, put some money aside for
Yeah.
that. Take this, and then, okay, put some in the reserve fund, but just, put it all in the plan.
Yeah.
Say, here's $20 million, here's how it's gonna be divvied up. And some of it, you might wanna put it in official funds, but some of it you might wanna just earmark, kinda like, we've decided that some of the Forbes money was gonna be used for future land purchase, some of it's being
Yeah.
going into the stabilization fund,
Yeah.
that kind of thing, so.
Of course, we tried to move that money into funds in the state.
Right, we
undid that for
tried to
us.
do that, I know, but,
Yeah.
and that's some of the problems you get into when you put it into a specific fund, is where you have to then abide by the rules, and maybe it requires a 2/3 vote to get it out, and maybe, who knows what the need is in 2 years, that kind of.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing
Sarah?
about, go on, sorry.
Sorry. Well, a couple of questions. What's the balance of our stabilization
Just under
account?
12 million.
Okay, and how does that, and forgive me, because does that meet our fiscal policies?
Fiscal policy is 5%, we're at roughly 7%, just under 7%. But again, if you wanna go GFOA and standards out there.
Yeah, what's the
you're-
standard?
10 to 15% is, 15% is on the high end.
Okay, so 10 to 15
Yeah, I mean,
is
10%
the, is the
10% is
accepted
probably-
practice, more or
correct.
less.
Correct.
What
But again,
would-
if you have pressing needs, as Alan mentioned, no way, shape, or form is it ideal to put money into that and then take it out. And, that should be for the true rainy day when there's really issues.
What's an example of a rainy day?
I know.
That's what I'm struggling with, okay, because the rating agencies don't want you to take it out, because that looks bad, so when would they say, oh, that was reasonable to take it out?
There hadn't been ARPA during the pandemic.
I mean,
Yeah,
I mean,
or if
it-
the state-
When an asteroid
if-
falls on town hall, and we need the money to
Or if
repair
this-
it,
If the state stops funding, we don't get the $20 million from the state, all of a
In the
sudden
middle
that
of the year,
stops
kind of
somewhere
thing?
along the line, if,
Yeah.
okay.
there's an issue there.
Does it
Yeah,
recession-
you have a major gas leak or something, or, the new water tank falls down,
Takes out the high
Hospital.
school
Yeah.
in my house.
No, again, that should be for emergency purposes, that
Okay.
would
Yeah.
certainly,
But it would be something anticipated, like you lose your state funding in the middle of the year,
Funding
right?
DPW.
Okay. Which is, in
I
other
mean,
words, very unlikely.
a few years ago, probably the only time I can ever remember money being taken out of stabilization, we did it for the financing of the new DPW building. With the understanding, which is made very clear, is that
We paid it back.
for a period of time, we're gonna put money back so that it's whole again. But it allowed us to put a certain amount of money in, which saved us considerable interest down the road.
And not run an override.
Yeah,
Avoid an override is
yeah,
what it did.
that was part of it.
Is
too.
what it did, yes.
And you had money available to put it back with.
Yeah, over
something-
over 5-year period. we did.
Basically like self-financing.
Yeah.
Right.
But
Yeah.
still, that wouldn't be an ideal use of a stabilization account now, something
No.
like that.
No.
Okay.
again, if you
It's
exhaust.
different point, it was a different
Yeah.
point in time,
Yeah.
that's why I'm
Yeah.
asking.
Again,
It would not be an
especially for,
ideal use
Yeah,
of
and
it.
again, I just think that what happened the last couple of days is a perfect example of why we need money in a capital fund, because we know we're gonna have to do something here, it's gonna be a big dollar item. I wouldn't be surprised if it's upwards of $20 million
Right.
and everything is said and done, and I don't know how we're gonna be able to fund that, but if you have this, a nice piece of change, seed money, it may make it a lot easier down the road for people to accept, so.
But I guess my
We'll see.
concern is, we can talk about all of this, but we're gonna talk about next year's operating budget, and we're gonna be in the same situation that we are this year.
Yeah.
27.
So that takes away a lot of, if we keep doing that, I mean, this is what we're all saying, right? Like, to be very clear, like, if we use somewhere between $7 and $9 million this year, what is leading us to believe that we aren't gonna have to use that same amount next year? And that's most of the money that we have in free cash right now,
You know,
correct?
It's a decision, I think, that as a town, we're gonna have to make, is what do we wanna do? Do we wanna just continue to use free cash to, the plug of the budget, or we just wanna say, all right, let the town make a decision on which way it wants to go, and do it this year, well, rather than wasting money, or just spend all the free cash and do it in the subsequent year. I think that's more the discussion. I think that's a high-level discussion that the town will have to have.
Where's that high-level discussion start?
Here.
Well, it'll have to be, with general government and the schools, I think we'll probably have to have some of those discussions. I mean, I'll be perfectly honest, I have issues with using substantial amounts of free cash continually to finance the budget. If that's the case, let's make a decision on which way we want to go forward, put it to the town, let them go vote up or down, and we'll move on.
Can I suggest that at some point in time, we have a board or something put up here, and we go through the pros and cons, and we have a discussion about this. We just in a working environment, not making decisions or anything, and we go through this before we go to any other groups in the town, the schools or general government.
Is it our purview? I just wanna make sure it is, I don't know.
It-
We need to make a
Somebody-
recommendation of use of free
Somebody has
cash.
to do this. Somebody has to make out what we want to do and why we want to do it. And we have to be able to tell everybody the same thing. Everybody gets the same message. And, and then they give us their input on whatever it was. And that's how we're gonna work it out. Because, sorry, that's.
No,
I
don't
think
think
we should
that's,
do it.
I'm just,
I think that's a really interesting idea. I think the first challenge I see to that is that we need the input from, like, capital outlay, we need the input from the schools, we need, but I really like the idea of starting to think along those lines to figure out what would be the inputs that we would be looking for and where could we get those.
can we add this to our next, well, I don't know. Is this a post-budget discussion?
I mean, in some ways, I can see the value of saying, like, let's wait until we figured out what the budget is, but we're also going to be making a recommendation for putting a fair amount of free cash into the budget, and so it's hard to have those conversations in a vacuum. We need to have a better understanding of what are the other pressures that we see coming. And so it's hard to know how to make that all fit together. And then I don't know, typically the town meeting warrant is set like 35 days in advance or something like that. So that would be very early in April that they would need to be, if we did want to put a couple of warrant articles on related to moving free cash into
That would be March.
stabilization.
35 days from May town meeting,
Yeah.
end of March.
It's
Yeah.
early-
Assume-
yeah, it's
earlier than
earlier-
that.
Assume the
it's
middle of
earlier.
March, yeah.
Right, we would want to be asking by middle of March. I think the selectmen are probably voting in early April because
Okay.
town
Yeah.
meeting starts the
Yeah.
second Monday in May.
Okay, yeah, so in March.
Is
we'd
it
have to have a-
35 days or is it 45 days? I have no
I
idea.
don't know. But,
Off the top of my head either.
but anyway, it's coming up.
Yeah.
Quickly.
Yeah,
Okay. I mean, I think a plan to use the excess free cash would necessarily involve a plan, some kind of statement about what the plan is after it's gone. We're using this year because next year we're going to fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm.
Or we're gonna use it this year and next year, and then the year after that, we're going to fill in the blank,
Yeah. I know, I'd rather fill in the blank earlier than later, but
Has
that's
to be
just
Yes.
And anyway, fill in the blank.
That's just
you know,
me, yeah.
But, yeah, because if you're gonna use 7 million this year, it's gonna have to be 9 million next
Yeah.
year, and then there's
Is that a
nothing left.
BBC
and then-
discussion? Or is-
yeah, maybe that is a BBC discussion. I'll bring that to the BBC next,
I mean, the hope is the next year is not as much. I mean, that's been talked through the BBC as well. We've got some salary contracts that have gone in this year that will require a larger jump than we do for the out years expected. So we don't think it's gonna compound on top of this. It should be
Right.
less of an increase for next year, but still.
Well, again,
not enough
if
revenue
you've got a
coming in,
bump, then, okay, an unusual spike in spending, then you use one-time money to deal with a one-time spending spike. But if it's just, things are just escalating up, that's a different story.
It's
right.
not
Well, and I think that,
Same speed.
I haven't looked at this year's general government budget, but I know that at some point we were gonna have to start paying a significant amount of money for dispatch, and I don't know. So, okay, maybe salaries aren't going up as much, but then there's a $700,000 payment for dispatch, or whatever the number is.
So I think,
660 or something, it was originally.
Yeah, it was like in that range,
Right.
yeah.
Next year mean fiscal year 26.
27.
Oh,
Yeah,
27.
and
not
there-
next
and
year.
there was,
Okay.
there was a large jump in government, general government salaries this year. A
Yeah, and there was as
significant-
much as the schools,
A significant,
so-
probably, I think, greater than the schools.
Yeah.
On a percentage basis.
Yeah. All right. How about I add this to the BBC agenda for our meeting the last week in February and express our desire as a FinCom to get the three major boards and the administration to be thinking about what are these bigger ticket
Okay.
items that are coming, and what, do we want to come up with a game plan?
Mm-hmm, yeah, okay.
Liaisons from other committees, CPC, what's up with them, Eric? Do you know?
I do know.
Excellent.
I have my notes somewhere. Yes, so CPC had their public hearings. They also voted on the 7 applications that they have and voted to recommend them. So that was not the latest note, but that's basically what they did. Yeah, so they voted on the amounts. They did increase how much they wanted to spend on the housing authority roofs, because they figured it made sense to give enough money to get enough match money to do the whole project, as opposed to just part of the project. So like, if you have an
Mhm.
opportunity to get the match, go for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the projects are essentially, and then they, made a recommendation on which of their sub-funds the monies would come from. So that's where they're at. They've had their hearings, they've got their recommendations, and then they're meeting with us next month.
Will it just be the 7 projects that they would be bringing?
Just the 7 projects.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's all I've got in the pipeline at the moment.
Okay.
Okay. All right, and then schools, Sarah, anything to report?
Yes, I actually attended the budget subcommittee meeting this afternoon, and they are working towards the request that was presented at budget balancing. They
Okay.
seem to be making good progress towards it. They're going to be talking to the school committee in the next, the school committee meets again. I don't know if they meet before the next budget balancing, but they're just trying to pull it all together so that they can, they were moving towards that 1.2 number.
Okay.
I mean, it's
Good,
not easy, but I think they're gonna get pretty close.
good.
So,
Okay. And then capital outlay, we've been talking about a little bit, but anything additional that?
No, we're sort of, we don't have, what, April was,
Yeah.
Yeah, we
it's
have a-
starting,
just April.
most projects moving well, like as far as the ones that
The
were
ones seem
approved?
to be, yeah, what they've done.
All right. Okay, then I would like to talk about the long-term agenda. Deborah gave us all a copy of it, thank you very much. A reminder that we need to take a photo for the annual report tonight.
It's school picture day.
But also, so our next meeting is currently scheduled for March 6th. We were supposed to meet with the CPC and discuss the preliminary budget with the schools. And then, talk about anything that's going on with budget balancing. We will certainly do that, and I can certainly give you guys an update in between meetings as well. I can email you just updates. The schools have a little bit of a conflict. The superintendent is going to a conference, and he will not be back that night. He's coming back, I think, the next day. And so he would prefer to be in person to meet with us as opposed to being remote. Looking at the other meetings in March, we already have 3 other meetings in March, and they're pretty full. So I don't suggest that we add the school. I think the general government budget on itself deserves a whole meeting, and facilities in Blue Hills is probably enough for another meeting. Certainly adding the schools would not make sense there. The schools were asking if we could possibly meet with them on March 13th. We had originally not scheduled a meeting that night because we thought we might possibly be in special town meeting, but the March special town meeting has been canceled. So that's no longer an issue. But we already told, so but moving the whole March 6th meeting, I suppose would be an option, but we already told CPC that we would be meeting with them on the 6th. I hate to reschedule with them. I don't know if the 13th is even available for people, but I wanted to have that discussion with all of you. I'm actually not even 100% sure if the 13th is available for me. I meant to check that. I
Yeah,
forgot.
I have to, I'm not available the 6th.
Okay.
I think, again, I don't have my book with me. I think I'm available the 13th, but, not 100% sure. But I definitely am not available on the 6th.
Everybody
Any of those
else?
days work for me, so it's,
We also have the schools in here for March 22nd, or 27th. Are you gonna do another meeting
Yes.
with them?
Yes,
Yes, the
Preliminary.
idea was to kind of,
usually need to do that.
yeah.
Is
A lot of
the,
schools.
is the 27th the day we vote on the school budget?
Typically,
I think
yeah.
so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that would be after their, after they finalize the budget. So the idea of meeting earlier was for the FinCom to provide some input into the school budget before it was finalized. And then to have a meeting where we discuss the final budget and approve. And vote on whether or not to approve, I guess, specifically what we do.
I'm available on the 13th, so I can.
I mean, the one thing is, of course, the 13th means it's later in their cycle, but if we could talk about that. So is the meeting on the 13th a possibility? It seems like it is for
me.
you. And, okay, all right.
I think I can make out.
And you definitely can't make the 6th, so.
Definitely cannot make the 6th.
Okay, so then I guess the question is, should we ask the CPC if they could possibly change? Or do we want to just stick with, just add one more meeting in March?
yeah, just have a quick meeting, just them, and then.
I'm
it's gonna
almost
take long.
prefer to do the one quick meeting on the 6th and one on the 13th, because I
Okay.
think it might, I don't know, that's my opinion.
Okay.
Just because schools tend to be longer, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, it's the biggest budget in town. We deserve
Right.
to spend as much time with them as we
Yeah.
can.
Okay with me to have two.
And I'll work my schedule out,
All right,
maybe.
I will get back with the schools, and we will
Sounds
leave CPC on the 6th, even though Alan can't join us.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Any other topics for discussion?
I did confirm Blue Hills is good for the 20th at 7 PM.
Great, thank you. Yes, the facilities said that they preferred to go first.
And they did say, once they have their documents, they'll send them over to me and I'll coordinate some of them.
that's
Great.
great.
Thank you so much for doing that.
Just a question, so we're still planning sometime in May, we'd meet with our financial advisors? That's still,
Again, we could have that conversation.
I just wanted to ask, in terms of,
I would,
Go ahead.
sorry, but again, I think I would prefer to have the auditors come in versus the financial advisors, but we can discuss.
I think it'd be helpful to speak to the auditors, yeah. Especially since we have
It's
new
their first
auditor
year, yeah.
team.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the biggest item in the FinCom's budget is accounting and auditing.
Correct.
Is that expense, is that simply going up over time, or is it one of those cyclical things like elections?
3-year contract.
Okay, but is it the sort of thing like, where there's a lot of, is high spending this year and less the next 2 years, and high, no, it's just kind of,
There's a slight escalator in there each year.
okay, yeah, but it's a uniform
Correct.
need every year, okay, so that's just clarification.
yeah, it's not like the assessor's office does their
Yes,
assessment and,
Yeah, I was looking at the past years, and there seemed to
Yeah.
be some up and down, and I was wondering
Yeah.
if there was a cyclical thing, where, every third year you have
Like
to
the
do
past
something
years,
extra.
the bill paying in the past years was questionable.
Ah,
The actuals was
Ah,
questionable. timing and
okay.
all that.
ah, okay, I understand that completely.
Duh,
Okay,
okay.
no more need to be said, okay.
Speaking of, has the FY23
No.
audit been completed?
So we still remain in limbo with Markham/CBiz. I did get a confirmation this morning that they are moving forward. This follows a January 8th email I got that said they should have them over to us in a couple of weeks. So we've put a little additional pressure on them.
Who's this for?
The fiscal year '23
I'm
audit.
hoping we haven't paid this one.
We have not paid that.
Okay,
We-
good.
We've received the draft documents back in October, so
Right.
it's completely, and I did talk to Hilltop Security Study because I'm getting nervous that S&P may start looking and saying, hey, where's the audit? You know, you failure to file, all of this stuff. Been assured that we're not the only ones. Markham to CBiz has created problems for many others. So it is not us. It is, and we sent over an explanation today of the time frame of all the emails and conversations we've had with Markham. So I'm hoping that the additional pressure we put on them today will get them over all of the documents and the review that they need to do over the hurdle fairly quickly. There's some pressure on the schools as well. DESI's looking for the single audits, so there's additional items that are coming down on us, so.
Okay, do we have a long-term contract with these guys?
No, that's done. Markham's done, so it's, Roselli Clark is a new auditor
All
for this
right,
year.
so they could care less, essentially, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, it
Professionally,
doesn't
they
seem like
have to
they
do
care about their
it.
reputation right
Yeah.
now with us and other clients.
Yeah,
And that was my hesitation as well in terms of looking at legal aspects of this.
yeah.
We need those reports, so I don't want to further delay anything else, but we'll give them another week or two to see what happens.
And the FY24 audit is already underway, but it can't be completed until the FY23 audit is
Correct.
completed.
Part of the confirmation this morning was that they are getting the information required to Roselli, because they had asked for their worksheets, because there's a lot of work that they do behind the scenes to
Sure.
adjust the financial statements. So they did say that they're in communication, and they're gonna get that information over to them.
How long should an audit take?
All depends. It depends on where you stand in there. Again, going with Roselli will be one of their larger clients, so they're motivated to get it done. That's why they were in here in December. They did a lot of the work already. So you should have everything done. You know, standard is 6 months past the closing of the year.
Okay, that's
So
what I was asking.
December,
is-
but no later than March. Once you hit after March, it's what's called a failure to file with the corporate bond, the EMA. You have to file, say, you know, I don't have my reports in.
Alright.
And there may be some questions coming at that point.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
we're
we're
covered.
11 months late for the
Correct.
FY23 audit.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's frustrating to everybody, but like I
Yes,
said, you know,
yes.
We're not
not that it
alone.
gave, exactly, not that it gave us any additional comfort, because I don't really care about others, I care
Right,
about us.
yeah.
But we're not
Yeah.
alone, and
Okay.
it's a much larger corporate issue with Markham. And from what I'm hearing is, you know, they're looking to reduce their clientele, which obviously by doing this is probably a pretty good way to do it. But I also think that they're looking
Yeah.
at some of their clients and that they know that they have captive, that they're just gonna raise their fees. So for them, I don't think it's a big deal financially, but reputationally, it's certainly not great.
And Markham is being bought out by CBiz.
Markham was bought out by CBiz,
Was
the
bought by
merger went
CBiz.
through
Interesting.
January 1st. Markham had gone through, so we had, I forget what they were called, but the audit firm we had was then bought by Markham, who was then bought by CBiz.
Okay,
So-
time to get rid of them.
An interesting business plan to buy a business and then try to reduce its revenue.
I think they'll try to reduce their workload for the same revenue.
Ah,
Okay.
Brilliant business plan.
Yeah. Of course, it's good if it works.
yeah.
It works.
That's unusual.
Yeah.
Okay.
But like I said, Roselli Clark has been great to work with so far.
Good.
And they're supposed to get back here in the end of February, early March, but hopefully we'll get everything.
Good.
All right, so action items and follow-up. I think we all now have some homework to do in reviewing the budget information that we've been given, the preliminary budget information. I will make sure that I put on the budget balancing committee agenda that we talk about
Big picture.
big picture and plans for free cash and things like that. And mention that the FinCom would be interested in talking with the other boards about that. And I will reach out to the schools about a March 13th meeting. Deborah, can you post that? Thanks. And, oh, we need to take our picture. Almost forgot. Anything, I think that's it, right? So, and our next meeting would be on March 6th and would just be CPC. And like, whatever
Budget.
updates are coming about the budget process and things
Yeah.
like that. But the only visitors we would have would be CPC.
Okay.
All right. Anything else before I entertain a motion to adjourn? All right, then I'll,
Motion to adjourn.
thank you, Sarah. Second by
Second.
Alan. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.